that yesterday. It was so boring.
The 4 hours? Oh my goodness, how was it?
You know what? I didn't stay very long because I had a,
Hello,
I had a 12 o'clock. With Samantha
Oh,
that I
okay,
was
yeah,
in. So,
yeah,
but I was here for a little bit. It was pretty good, but, and I was glad that we had a break, but it's just, it, you know, it's too, I think we need to split it up, but it's just hard to sit there for 4 hours.
yeah, and that's already, so basically it's a 4-part series and each part is 4 hours. Yeah.
Yeah,
I don't
no,
know.
it was hard for me, so, but.
Let me go get Frank.
We have a big crowd today. It's
I'm
gonna be
here. I'm talking about the rest.
Yeah, that's right. It's gonna be a personal show. So you're great. I hope everything went well last
We
night.
missed you. Why didn't you show up?
I had to drive to Corona. The next one. Not for this house, for the next beautiful thing. This lovely weekend.
I would show you yours. You know, this public gatherings, because I was trying to do it blindly.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, you can show me what you need. That would happen if you want to.
They're like public gatherings, status, prize, number of bedroom bath, active soul.
Okay,
Like how many colors?
Okay, yeah.
It's in my blood.
It's gonna draw it out.
If you do just one copy and paste
Yeah.
into my flyer,
Yeah.
that would be awesome.
Okay, yeah. We can, yeah. Hey, Sandy.
No, it's okay.
I guessed that there was gonna be very few people here.
I'm here.
I know, I didn't say nobody, I said very few. Only the important ones came. How was your broker open?
We missed you.
You know what happened?
Progress.
Okay.
I'm doing from day one, like I've been winging it the entire time. Is anybody on?
Yes.
Yeah, we
Oh, there we go, hey,
quite a few
hey,
people on.
Aaron. Man, I got Aaron in here, man, I thought we blocked him out a long time ago. Aaron's at Costco, that's where Aaron's at.
Oh, I invited her,
I need some of that bulk vodka.
but I'm hoping that she read the book.
Okay.
But she was supposed.
Yeah, so I don't know how you wanna do this, I thought we would have a lot more people here, and I'm talking to everybody. I mean, this is really disappointing because this is by far the most important
Yeah.
meeting that we've probably ever had.
I think everybody's getting tired of conversations about the NAR settlement.
But this is a role play to show you how to do it.
Well, that's even worse, nobody likes role plays.
Well,
Aaron had a role play class, and I think a whole total of 0 people showed up every time.
you know
he
what's
taught the
funny
class.
is that I do a role play class on Tuesday for another coaching company. It's actually a guy that I coach and he started his
Yeah.
own coaching company. And we have 50 people on there every morning. And they're consistent, but if you don't know what to say, then it's just a mental block for you guys that you're gonna get a buyer and not be able to get paid.
Absolutely.
And so I have questions still
Okay.
on as we're going through this. So if you just want to be the agent and I'll be the buyer and then I'll see how you do it so I can be better.
Works for me, absolutely,
So question, maybe
Yes.
you can address it.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Let's say, I have a buyer agreement,
You have a buyer and you have a buyer
contract,
agreement.
and I put 2.5,
Yeah,
right?
2.5%, yes.
That if the seller doesn't cover, they have to cover.
Yep.
And, we reached an agreement with the listing agent that they were paying 225. Right?
So you're down,
Can I just let go of the 25 and
Yeah.
give it,
Yes.
the credit to my client?
absolutely,
But the problem with that is if you put in 2.5 and you happen to show a property with 3%,
Yeah.
you're gonna get paid 2.5.
No.
but you can
I-
also renegotiate at some point and put in a modification of terms
Right.
and change everything.
Oh,
So,
Yeah,
yeah, so
yeah.
you can change everything.
yeah, because, and what I've noticed, I might be wrong, but I've noticed, since this whole thing came up, I see a lot of 2%.
It's people that have not been able to negotiate their commission on the front end, and they're probably getting pushed back, which is kind of the reason we're having this conversation. And so they're like, oh, I'm just gonna do this, this, and this now, and they're not able to handle the seller's
So,
objection.
you know, I just opened escrow on a condo yesterday, and, the commission was 225. So I put it in the offer that I wanted to put
Mhm.
right? And he came back and said, I would have offered you that if you would have brought me a full offer. And I said, you know, and this is between the listing agent.
Yeah.
I said, you know, I deserve 3%. You know why? Because I brought you all cash offer closing in 20 days.
So can I give you a coaching moment on this?
Sure.
The problem, not just with that, but with all of us as agents, is that we know what we do, we know what we bring, and we know how much work we do. Nobody else does. We don't communicate to them on the front end how much work that we have to do to actually get their property closed. So they come back to us and say, oh, if you would have done X, Y, Z, it's like, what do you mean? If I would have done X, Y, Z, I've already done da, 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 da. But the thing is, they don't know that. So we have to actually change the way we communicate with our people so they know how much we are doing, so that they go, wait, you deserve way more than 6%. You know,
And this is a listing agent. He should know better.
Right.
You know, because he has been representing buyers at some time,
Yeah.
at some point in time, right?
Okay, so we're gonna get started to be respectful out of the people that are actually on Zoom, if that's okay, and then we'll answer all questions. Frank and I'll be here afterwards, if that's okay with you.
absolutely.
All right, so just to set the stage, Frank is our mega agent, and I am a first-time home buyer.
Okay.
And so I'm pre-approved,
Okay,
we're just meeting,
Mhm.
and I've been pre-approved for $1 million.
how are we just meeting?
We're meeting in
Are
the
you
office.
meeting in the office?
Yeah,
Okay,
so,
so I've already converted you, I got you in the office.
yeah, so I'm already, I'm already, like, I met you at an open house,
Okay,
let's say, but that's not the house for me. And so
okay,
we can go from there.
okay. So if we're meeting in the office, I'd sit us down
Right,
and we would, basically have a conversation on what you're looking for.
okay,
And I would go through basically the presentation that I had that basically showed you all the services that I do. Whenever I do my presentations for sellers or for buyers, there's two parts to it. There's the value part that shows everything that I do that gives value to working with me, and then there's price. So on the buyer side, there's the value part to where I say, okay, have you ever bought a house before? So typically, before we sit down, I'd find out if you had a house to sell.
okay.
I would say, before you go on this home buying journey, do you have a house to sell to actually buy your next house? And would your answer be,
No, because I'm a first time home buyer.
okay, great, fantastic. And so what I would sit down and do is we'd sit down and go through the presentation and I would say, so this is how it works. And at the end of the presentation, I would just ask for your loyalty. And then we would, after you're like, okay, you're the person for me, I go, okay, great. Let's talk about how pre-approval works. Have you ever been pre-approved before?
Yes,
Okay, who are you pre-approved with?
Oscar at Rocker Mortgage.
Oh, Oscar is amazing. And how quickly do you need to move into a property?
Well, I'm in a rental right now, so I'm on month to month, so I'd like to get into something as soon as possible.
Okay, so now typically I would have a conversation with their lender to figure out where are they at with their money and their down payment to see if they would have the money to pay me on the commission side of it. And so we're doing it with the new rules, I would imagine.
Yeah, we're doing it with the new rules and I don't have the money to pay, but we haven't got to that point yet. But
Okay.
I think that is the biggest problem, at least for me and the people that I'm coaching, and probably for every agent, is what happens then and how do we orchestrate that?
So I think what needs to change, what's going to change is there's gonna have to be a tremendous amount of due diligence on the agent's part, the buyer's agent's part, than there ever has been. Because you're gonna have to find out a whole bunch of information before you really have this conversation. Like, I'm gonna need to know, are you pre-approved? Who you pre-approved through? I'm not pre-approved. Great, let's meet and let's have a conversation. If you are pre-approved, like you're telling me this, it's like, okay, who's your lender? Because we need to coordinate with that person to make sure that all of our ducks are in a row to get you to where you need to be to buy the property. And so I would have a conversation with Oscar before meeting to see how much are you putting down, how are you qualified, and how all that would work. So can you give me that information? So I'm
Yes.
working with that, okay.
Right, so I'm pre-qualified for the $1 million and I have the assets in the bank to come up with the 20% down
Mhm.
plus my closing costs, so I don't need anything from the seller at this point.
Okay,
And so at this point, I'm not even aware, because I'm a first-time home buyer, that buyer agency exists.
Mhm.
And I think with first-time home buyers, and this is just my 2 cents, they don't know any better.
No.
So that's a benefit, but then on the flip side, most first-time home buyers don't have an extra 2.5%, 3% to front for the buyer's agent, and that's where me, even as a coach, are challenged.
Yeah.
So,
so you start everything with a question because you don't want to assume the person knows anything.
right,
And you want to educate them on what they don't know and not educate them on something they already know. And so I would just say, you've never bought a property before. Do you understand how buyer agency works?
no, I
Okay.
don't, Frank. I
So,
don't even know what that is.
so what buyer agency is it's basically an agreement between you and myself, is me representing you.
Okay,
Because I have the fiduciary responsibility to make sure that I do the best possible job for you and not compete against you with another buyer or the seller or whatever. So they have their representation and you have your representation. And
okay,
if you think, based on the presentation that I gave you, if I'm the person to represent you, we can move forward to the next part of the discussion. How do you feel about working?
yeah, I mean, I just want to go and buy a house, but
Awesome.
the whole contract thing and, like how much I have to put down for a deposit, and, my biggest fear is that, like, if something happens during the escrow, like, I know we get an inspection period, because you
Yep.
explained that to me really well.
Absolutely.
Like, if we don't agree on something that I'm not happy about, how do I get my deposit back? Like, I'm worried about that, and you
Absolutely.
can help me with that, right?
Absolutely. So in the contract, that there's a contingency period, and we'll go over all of that because typically price is not the issue when you buy a property. It's usually the terms, and we want to make sure all the terms work for you. We want to make sure everything works for you. So we're going to go over everything in detail and in depth, and I'm going to go over every contract that we ever sign to make sure that you're comfortable with it. And are you okay with that? Yes. Okay, perfect. So when it comes down to compensating agents, I don't know if you've heard about the NAR settlement or all the real estate news that's been out there in the media on how
No,
that works.
I don't even know what NAR is.
Okay, National Association of Realtors, it's
Okay.
the largest trade organization in the United States.
Okay.
So with that, everybody has a fee when they go into a transaction like this. And in some cases, the seller will pay my fee. But there's other cases where the seller may not, and we may be able to negotiate with that. But that being said, there may be a point where you find a house that you love, and that fee for my services may come from you.
Okay, well, how much is that?
It's typically about 2.5% to 3%. It really just depends. It's all negotiable. And that's why we're in the situation where the seller doesn't always pay it. In some cases, they will, and that's when we run upon a house that has an issue or that's different. You and I are going to talk about that, and then we're going to figure out what works best for both of us moving forward.
Okay, so if I did the math right, let's just take the highest number, 3% off a million is 30 grand.
Yep.
Which I don't have, to be honest with you, Frank. So how, that's, I'm just being upfront, that's gonna be a problem because I don't have that money, but I want you to be my agent because I want to be protected.
Right, so the majority of homes out there right now will most likely have seller compensation for my services, but in a case where it doesn't, that's something that we can talk to the listing agent about, and we can also talk to your lender to see if we can work with the numbers so that everybody gets what they want.
Okay.
And so I think, just off script, if that's
Yeah.
that's a conversation we're gonna have with the lender on the front end, because if somebody's coming in with 20% on a $1 million property, that's $200,000, there should be a way to finagle the commission or the down payment or something to make that happen. Because you don't always need 20%,
Right.
if you're a first-time home buyer. But
And I think that's another good conversation to have with Oscar, because
Yeah.
there's a difference between having that 20% down and then knocking it down to, the 10-15%, there's a difference in rate.
Yep.
And they're not gonna be willing to negotiate that rate to pay our fee,
Yep.
in my opinion.
And one of the other things you can say is like, listen, if the property isn't $1 million, we can put my fee on top of that, and we can offer more than the $1 million to wrap that into your loan, and then the seller will pay. Does that make sense?
Right, but then I'm overpaying for the property.
Not necessarily, because it has to go through an appraisal process, and if we can determine that it will appraise, that means you're paying what the property is actually worth. We're just adding my fee that you say that you can't pay right now on top of it,
Right.
so that you have the proper representation.
Okay. Yeah, so worst case scenario, if I do find a house and they're not paying and we can't, then how do I buy that?
Well, that's something we're gonna have a conversation with your lender about, to see what we can do.
So we don't know.
We don't know, and I think that,
So that's, I
well,
think we're
Yeah.
we're at that point, Frank, and this is where I think I can use your help, and all the agents can use your help, is that at that point, how do we make that buyer feel confident enough that they're still going to be taken care of, because it's such an exciting time for them. They've been pre-qualified. It's their first home, and now we're hitting them with this, because of course, the only thing that's going to stick in their mind is, what if I find a
Yeah.
property that's not willing to pay the commission, and that scares them. So I'm still searching for an answer,
Yeah.
or with the best answer, the best approach, so we can.
I think that everybody always wanted to work, has always wanted to work with sellers. Why do we always want to work with sellers?
Because of the commission.
But why do we get paid? Because there's a contract involved.
Right.
There's already a written agreement involved. The reason people don't want to work with buyers, and because it was so easy to work with buyers, because there was never a contract involved. That's why, buyers are liars, because buyers could literally go around, say whatever, do whatever, work with whatever, say, I'm gonna work with this, or I'm gonna work with, because there was never a contract involved. Now, I think that if you can become a savvy buyer's agent, you can actually hold a very strong position, just like the seller, the listing agent position as a buyer's agent, because now if I have a buyer that can't pay my commission, and I go to a seller that's not offering a buyer agent commission, this is what I'm gonna say. I'm gonna go to the other agent, I'm gonna say, hey, I have somebody that wants your property, we love the property, it's an amazing property, and we wanna put an offer on it. What would you say as the other agent?
Great.
It's fantastic, but we have a problem, and I wanna see if we can work through it. The problem is that you guys are not offering a commission. So would your seller be willing to pay my commission if we were able to put an offer together?
I think he would. I mean,
That's the conversation.
I'm an agent on the other side too, Frank, so I hear it.
Yeah.
He's just been really challenged. Of course, he heard the NAR settlement and I wanted to, secure the listing, so I went ahead and took it at that percentage. But I think that I can make that work. So just write it up. Give me something in writing. And we'll see how we
So
can
you
do.
write it up and you put your commission in there, and you put a buyer broker agreement, and you put everything in there saying that they're gonna say it, and what they can do is they can say no. But this is also something that you've actually been in real estate long enough to where you even I think your first transaction, you did something like this, is that I think COVID and the internet has actually tarnished our business to where we email. Like I remember when I got it, it was like fax. And now it's like email. Like people are emailing offers and they never have a conversation or call the listing agent ever. And it's just like, stop sending me blind offers and like pick up the phone and talk to me and develop the relationship with the other agent. Having a relationship with the other agent, I think, is super valuable. And that used to be back in the day, it used to be that way. If you can learn how to present your offer
Yeah.
in a situation like that, I would call the other agent and say, hey, listen, you guys aren't offering a commission, like, what's that about? And I get that information. I say, well, we have an offer. It's a full price offer, but I would just need your client to pay my commission. Are you okay?
It's going to come full circle, and really where the agents are going to fail is because you're absolutely right. We're living in a day and age where you don't have to talk to anybody. And this again comes in what we've been honing in on you guys is those negotiation skills. If you don't know how to negotiate and you don't know how to talk to another agent, then I'm gonna say it, you're just gonna be scrambling and be out of the business. Now, I want to stick with this same scenario. I can't pay. We get to the buyer agency contract.
Yeah.
Where do we write in? Because I'm not comfortable as the buyer signing that I'm gonna pay you 3% if the seller doesn't, because I don't have it. So what verbiage do we write in there, if any?
So,
How does that work?
so when we write in my commission in the buyer agency agreement,
Right?
it is only, what's the word I'm looking for? You're not tied to paying that until we actually finalize an agreement. So if we find a property that you like and we enter into an agreement and then we sign off on everything, then you're liable for that. Until then, what I'd like to do is put in 3% because based on the value proposition I gave you and what I'm worth, I think that you would agree that I'm worth 3%. You just don't have it. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, so what I like to do, I'd like to write in 3%, and then let's go find a property where the seller's agent will pay us a commission. And if we find something you really truly love, what I'll work on doing is trying to get the seller to pay it, even if they say they won't. And I'll see if I can negotiate my own commission from the other side.
Okay, and then if it doesn't, that contract still says that I'm liable for 3%. So we do the negotiation, you go and ask that agent, Frank, and they say no, but I can buy that house. It's in my affordability. And now but I don't have the money to pay it. Where do we go from there?
Well, then realistically, what we're gonna have to do is you're gonna have to look at homes that are a little bit cheaper so you can take the money that you would normally pay for that property and put that toward the commission, because any agent's going to want to be compensated. Very few people are gonna work for free.
Right.
And I think there's a
I-
difficult conversation to have.
No,
You're
it's,
gonna have to have.
this is the conversation that I wanted to have because, it's the worst case scenario for everybody,
Yeah.
right? But it's gonna happen. And it's gonna happen at that time before you even have the opportunity to show them property because they're still on the hook for that,
Yeah.
that 3%.
Yeah.
So,
And
So
instead of
I
looking for
think-
their max price range, you look for $950. And you say, listen, you have $30,000, we're gonna pull back a little bit of your commission, you're qualified up to $1 million, we're gonna look for 950, we're gonna get you into something for 950 commission. We'll put it up to 970, 980, and then you're good to go. The problem is that us as agents, it's like, oh, you're qualified for 2 million. Let's go look at $2 million houses. In this market, that is the worst idea that you can do, because I'll give you an example. We just listed a property in Sylmar. Oh, man, she's gonna kill me. 750 maybe in Sylmar? I'm like, man, that's expensive. We had 20 calls on it last night.
Yeah, it's great.
20 calls. So it's like, but the thing is that if you're qualified up to 750, you are already priced out because we got 20 calls, it's going over, 100% is going over. And so what we need to do is have a conversation and say, listen, Oscar, she's qualified up to $1 million, but if they can't pay my commission, what price should we be looking at? And you as a professional should be like, okay, we're looking at 950. And have that conversation, say, listen, this is my commission, because nobody likes to work for free. Like, you have a job and you're able to pay for this property. You don't work for free. I don't work for free. And this is how we overcome that. Instead of looking for $1 million property, we find something that you're happy with for 950, and that's what you're qualified for. I believe there's gonna be a part of this NAR settlement thing that ends up fleshing out that some of the buyer agency costs are gonna end up in closing costs. And that's what they're gonna be called.
Yeah.
So like when the lender works it out and they say, okay, this is your closing cost, those numbers will have our commission in it. That's what I believe will happen, but
That will be good.
I've been wrong most of the time.
No.
So
Someone has to. pay
Yeah,
for
so-
it.
Well,
you had a question.
what if they say, well, because right now inventory is really low.
Yep.
What if the house that I'm looking for is this one that don't happen to pay your commission? Can you cancel our agreement? Am I still-
Absolutely. Every agreement is cancelable. I don't,
Right.
and this is your choice as an independent contractor. You can do whatever you want with your agreement. I believe that if somebody wants to cancel an agreement, you just cancel the agreement. You don't lock them in, you don't
it's
play
not-
all these
no,
games,
we're good.
because what I found is that you're gonna lose some people, but you're also going to gain loyalty and admiration from other people who you do cancel, let them go, they're gonna come back. And you should never put all your eggs in one transaction. Like, let people go, because
Right.
that'll give you time to move on to other people that are gonna be more advantageous for you.
Yeah, so something I wanted to add to that too, as you're going through and we have that situation that we just went through, and let's say they do say, you know what? I understand that this is your dream home, you can't pay, and you want to cancel my agreement and go do it on your own. I just want you to be prepared, on $1 million house, you're required to put down a $25,000 deposit. Are you aware on how to get that deposit back in the event something happens that you're not satisfied with the house during the escrow period? Almost 9 times out of 10, they're
Yeah.
gonna say no.
The
I'm
key,
like, it just run with that scare
Yeah.
tactic of your $25,000, and then if you have to fight to get that back, that's gonna be attorney costs. And it's the exact same amount as your commission, but, right?
and when you do so the part of the value proposition and the price cost in the presentation is that you're supposed to show them so much value in the value part that they would never, ever, ever think about doing it on their own, and you would be the only person they work with because you're bringing so much value that they'll never find it from another agent.
Right.
I do that on the listing side. When I do a listing, I sit there and I go through all the reasons why you should work with me as an agent. And at the end of that part, I'm like, do you feel like I'm the person to represent you for this property? It's like, well, we're interviewing a bunch of agents. Well, okay, great. Have a nice day. We don't talk about price of the house. I'm like, no, I said, you're gonna talk about price of the house with somebody and they're gonna oversell it and get you to sell your house for way more when I can actually get you way more by not doing that. But it's like, if your value proposition on the front end of the presentation is good enough, they'll be scared, they'll never want to use anybody else, and they'll see your value.
Right.
And so that's really the key. I think the real conversation that we have as listing agents is how do we get them to pay the commission that they've heard in the news that they don't have to pay anymore.
Right, and that's a problem with the listing agent. We all know that, but that's just reality for our business.
Yeah.
And I think you're going to have those weak agents because it's going to be so much easier to take a listing at 3%, right?
Yep.
But that's how they get them in, and then being able, so I think at the end of the day, I think it's going to be okay. I think it's going to be a rough few months. That third quarter is going to be a challenge for everybody.
Yeah.
But that's why we're having this class now, and that's why we continue to hammer on you guys, and like 3 people showed up, which is, well, and then how many people do we have on Zoom?
We have
But-
almost 20.
Oh, nice.
On 20?
Yeah.
Oh, well, there you go. See, we were like thinking nobody liked us.
No, we have 20 people.
So
Yeah, okay, so good.
I wanted to talk about the seller objection for paying commission, because that's the one I've heard mostly so far, is that, do I have to pay your commission? And I've heard I don't have to pay 6%. And the way I would address that I've already addressed that with some people, is that if somebody comes to me and says, do I still have to pay 6%? Or do I still have to pay a buyer agent commission? I said, no. This is important. No, you never did. You never had to pay it. This is the thing that is changing, but it's staying the same. Is that they're classifying what it is in the MLS different, but in the reality, it's all still the same. And if you can, as an agent, show your value and explain why we're paying another agent, you're not paying, because in the lawsuit that we lost, one of the plaintiffs said, I didn't feel comfortable paying the person negotiating against me. And nobody said anything. The other attorneys didn't say anything. And I'm like, are you kidding me? I'm like, that's not why you're paying them. They're negotiating for their clients, and you're paying the commission for exposure. And I think that is the conversation you have with sellers, to say, listen, you never had to pay the other agent. The way it works, and this has always worked for me. I say, do you know how commission works? And 100% of the time they go, no, they go, yes. Can you explain it again? That's a no, because nobody likes to feel stupid, right? Nobody's like, no, I don't know what that means. Everybody's read a book and heard something about real estate commission, so they think they know how it works. So you just ask them, hey, do you know how commission works? And if they say yes, go, okay, how do you think it works? Because it has changed. And you get them to explain it back to you. And then when they explain it back to you, say, you know what, that's really great description, but let me explain how it works from my end. Never make them wrong. It's kind of like trying to make your kids wrong, right? If you make your kids wrong, they're just going to push back on you. And then you say, listen, on a 6% commission, because that's basically the industry standard, but it's still negotiable. We split that in half. I take 3% to represent you for the marketing, for the photos, for all the things that I do, which is the list that I just gave you, which you should, as an agent, give them a list of all the things that you do, which we don't do typically. And I said, and the other 3%, we give to the other agent on the other side, but we're not just giving it to one agent, we're offering it to all of the agents. Would you rather have me looking to find a buyer for your house by myself, or would you rather have 10,000 plus agents looking for a buyer for you for your house? And see what they say. If they push back on that, I would ask them, would you like to get multiple offers on your house?
Of course.
Would you like to get more money than what we're offering? Because that's kind of the environment that we're in right now.
Yeah. I'm hoping
How do
so.
you think that happens?
That's why I'm hiring you, Frank.
Exactly.
I don't know, but I did hear on the news that we didn't have to pay that, so.
You don't. So if we don't pay that, this is what'll happen. We don't pay that, we're gonna put your house on the market and very few people are gonna look at it, because we're not offering that amount to anybody else. And that's your choice. You can 100% do
Right.
that.
And that's absolutely gonna happen.
Uh-huh.
So at that point, I would even say, you know what, and put it in the listing contract that we're gonna offer this for 2 weeks, and if it happens like it says, we don't get anybody showing it, are you willing at that point, after a 2-week period?
Yep.
To offer that buyer agent commission so we can market it properly to get you the highest price for your home?
But
That way you still secure the listing.
this is really important. Because I've never sold a property without being compensated as a buyer's agent if I found the buyer. If I have a listing agent, I say, listen, I'm gonna, the lowest I think we've done 5%, and we find the buyer, it's 4%. And I think that's really important as the listing agents say, listen, when they go, oh, I'm only giving 3%, so that's great. What do I get if I find the buyer? I don't want to work for free. My job is to represent you. If I have to represent the other person right now, that's twice the work do you work for free? I think having these conversations on the front end, like asking them, do you work for free, if they push back on you, is really important to have. Yes.
Why do you want to do a dual agency? Because I feel like it has been my practice.
Mhm.
I would refer it to another agent to write the contract and present the buyers, because I have fiduciary duties towards my
Absolutely.
seller. And I can do a good job
Yeah.
writing the offer for the buyers. I can be fair, I can be reasonable,
Yeah.
but I do not have any fiduciary duties towards my buyers. So
So being a husband-wife team with my wife, it's very easy to split that apart. But it's still, you still end up facing the conversation of like, how are we going to compensate myself or the other agent? How are we gonna, because nobody's gonna work for free. You're wanting someone to bring a buyer and represent a buyer for free. And the one thing you need to understand is that if I represent a buyer and I do it for free, there's liability involved. If I get sued or if there's an issue, like, I'm basically being sued for doing something for free. Would you do that? I think asking them questions and kind of guiding them down the path it's a skill. And it takes time. Like when I first started, I didn't magically know how to do all of this. I had to bump my head a lot. And I think that's something that we're gonna have to do. And this is why I think being a buyer agent that is really strong and can get somebody locked into a contract and have difficult conversations, you're gonna be just as good as a listing agent, because now you're gonna have somebody that's in a contract that's loyal to you. And I think there's a lot of people that are gonna have struggle. They're gonna get on the struggle bus, they're not gonna get off. There's gonna be a lot of people leave the business.
Yeah, and then, on the positive side with the buyer agent contract, because it's still such a heavy seller's market. And it's gonna continue to be a heavy, seller's market, just because we don't have any inventory. The buyers, and you have to get this in your head, the buyers need you more than ever. They might be able to go find a house on Zillow, but you know what they're not gonna be able to do? Is get a deal, get an offer without an agent, and I truly believe that. So when you're doing your buyer presentation, that's going to be another thing that you can use. That you have relationships with other agents, that you're able to have those negotiation skills, that you're able, and always use this, because this is just my winning line, is that, are you interested in off-market properties and foreclosures in addition to what's on the open market? And they're like, what? Yeah, of course, because they want a deal, right? So that works like, it's like magic. It's like fairy dust.
Yeah.
So make sure you use that. So we'll continue to, try to give you as many nuggets as possible, but I just think that you really need to pay attention to this and make sure that you're, at best be on top of your game, and it's gonna improve you as an agent, because there's gonna be agents that leave the business, and that's, sad, but it's a great benefit for us.
Yeah, and I think that having the conversation on the front end, and when we went back to the first role play we were doing, is that just finding out where they're at financially and say, hey, they're pre-approved for $1 million. What you don't want to have happen is have them go to the lender first, get pre-approved, and the lender goes, oh, you're pre-approved up to $1 million, but then you have the conversation and say, listen, no, you have to do 950. But I found $1 million property I already want. So it's kind of like you're working backwards in that situation, and having a really strong loan officer and connecting them to have that conversation. In the buyer presentation that I did, there's an opportunity to bring in the loan officer at the same time, so everybody is on the same page. But showing people property at the top of their price range, I have never thought was a strong tactic as a real estate agent, because you are almost immediately priced out in this market. You should always go lower. And we just actually said goodbye to a client because they kept going to the top of their price range, and it just wasn't working for them. And they literally are priced out of the market, and now they have to rent.
Yeah, because that's the problem. If they're looking at the top and then you're competing.
Yeah.
You gotta write it over asking, and then they're not qualified anyway. So
They're
you
not
just wait.
qualified and they don't have
Yeah.
a commission.
Yeah, so it's like, next.
But I think the way you fix all of this is that you have to work on the relationships that you have and that you're dealing with in your database. If you have strong relationships in your database, then you can have conversations that you wouldn't normally be able to have with people you don't know. And I think the relationship factor is going to be so much stronger moving forward in this new market with everything. Because people are gonna use you when they know you, like you, and trust you. And you just have to develop those relationships. That's why I say that the one thing you should be doing right now is learn everything you possibly can about the NAR thing, because everybody's talking about it in the news and everything they're saying is wrong. And then go to your people and talk to them about it. So they don't have to come to you, because now you're looking proactive, you look like a professional, and it makes you look way better if you're having these conversations on the front end. And it's a good reason to reach out, say, hey, Tammy, have you, I was just calling everybody that I know, and, I haven't talked to you in a couple months, I just wanted to see, there's a lot of things going on out there in the real estate world about the NAR settlement and the commission issues and all these things. I didn't know if you had any questions about any of that, and I just want to check in on you, see how you're doing.
I don't even know, really. I haven't even heard about it. I think I might have saw something, maybe on the news, but yeah, why? What's going on?
Oh, there was some lawsuit, and they basically said that you didn't have to pay 6% anymore, and that,
That's great.
well, that's not actually accurate, and that's why I'm calling you, is because the news has been reporting all of these things that are not accurate. The good thing about it is that there is gonna have to be a contract with buyers now, to where there wasn't one before. But other than that, not a lot has changed, but I just wanna let you know that when it comes to your real estate needs, I'm always here. If you have any questions, I have, all the information you need. If you need anything, I can send you some information, or you can text or call me if you ever have a question. Doing something like that
Right.
just makes you look like a professional.
Right, and so you had that conversation, that was easy, they don't need your services right now. And then you can always end the conversation, who are the top 4 or 5 people that who may be making a move in the next year or so.
Absolutely.
They always have at least somebody, and then it puts it in their mind, because every past client, and this is a lot for my seasoned agent, every single past client is worth 2 referrals minimum in the next 24 months, if you're nurturing your database. And that's another, big mistake that a lot of agents don't do as well. So that's something that is super important. But again, we just really want to make sure that you guys are informed, come and ask questions. I think the most important, I don't think it's, I don't think you have to know everything about the NAR, because it's constantly changing. I will give you some advice. Stay off Facebook and all the Facebook groups with the drama. That just makes you so sad, and like angry and, frustrated, and just puts too much into your head. But what you do want to do is be prepared for that question. And in my experience so far, and I'm telling Frank, I'm not having a lot of pushback. I'm not having a lot of people say, well, I don't think I have to pay 6%, or I don't have to sign the buyer, because a lot of people just don't know.
Yeah.
So, don't be surprised if you end up with a buyer and you present them with a buyer presentation. But I think on the flip side, maybe why a lot of people are scared too, is because they don't have a buyer presentation.
Yeah.
They're not prepared to carry them through that buyer presentation, and what does that look like? And for me, and I'll just give it to you real quickly if we have time, on that buyer presentation, you want to carry them through, because the biggest problem with a buyer, their biggest fear is what? When they're entering into escrow, does anybody know what would be their biggest fear?
Losing their
Exactly, thank you, Sam. Losing their deposit, right? So that's a lot of times why they have the pushback on whether or not they're going to make an offer on a property in the first place. So if you have that buyer presentation and ensure them that you're the person that's going to make sure that they know that this is the way you're going to get your deposit back. There's basically 3 major ways, right? We all know. Request for repairs. If we can't negotiate on those requests for repairs, you immediately, get your deposit back, right? What's the next one? They don't qualify for their loan, right?
Contingency
Right.
or basis for them.
Right, so for their loan, and then the other one would be if it doesn't appraise. So if they don't know that, they're just excited to buy a house, but then they get nervous about the deposit. So in your presentation, that's a very, very short condensed version, but letting them know that your $25,000 deposit is safe with me. Okay, which is basically, again, that buyer's agent commission. So it creates, a little bit of, I don't want to buy a house without her or without him, right? She's my person, and it really is able for you to seal the deal. So
That's why it's so important that we educate them before, so they will know our value and they will appreciate.
Right, and it's really, it's the value for them that you were, preparing, because the best thing, everybody wants to know, okay, well, what's next? Because there's steps, right?
Yeah.
You have to be pre-approved, okay, what's next? In the most agents, what's next? What do? They just start showing their property. Okay, well, that game has changed, and it should have always been this way,
Yeah.
that you should have always sat them down for a buyer presentation. But now that includes that buyer broker, agents don't like change, most people don't like change. But the agreement's not that big of a deal, it's a simple form, it's way easier than the purchase contract, So, I mean, I'd be surprised on how many agents have actually not even looked at that, which is scary, but it's like 3 pages,
Yeah.
it's not a big deal. Sam, did you have a question?
No, I just wanted to say, O.J. Simpson is dead.
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw
That's super
What
important.
happened?
I saw that this morning, I thought, you know what,
Wow.
all I can think of those films, but
He never
anywho.
paid.
Anywho, so, great conversation. What else are you seeing, Frank? Now that we can wrap up these next 12 minutes of concerns that we might have for our agents that they need to, that might keep them out of trouble. Let's talk about that. Like where are they possibly going to get in a pickle that might be going through their heads that they're too afraid to ask?
I think the biggest problem that we're gonna have as agents is that most of us don't even read the contract. We don't read the contract that we have the client signing. So us understanding the contract and being able to be transparent and being able to articulate it to the person, I think that is super important, because how many of us just have ever sat in front of a client and said, this is what this is, and they blindly signed it? That's part of the reason the lawsuit happened as well. But the people, they were signing it, saying that they've read it when they haven't read it, and then complaining that it wasn't explained to them. When I think that probably 30% of the agents out there have never read the contract ever.
Oh, I think it's more than that.
I'm trying to be nice. So it's like.
Not our agents.
Yeah,
No,
not
no.
ours.
Not
But I
ours.
think we should read the
Ours.
contract and understand it and like, oh, I didn't know it said that. Like, how many times have you asked an agent, a listing agent, as the buyer's agent, you asked them, so how many offers do you have and what's your highest offer? And they've said, I can't tell you.
I hate that answer.
That's not true. And I said that to an agent, I said, you realize that's not true, right? He's like, oh, well, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, no, on disclosure, this, and this, it says you can, unless you have written permission from the seller saying you don't have to. And they're like, I'm like, do you have that written permission? And he's like, well, I don't think it's ethical. I'm like,
How could it not be?
that's your opinion. It has nothing to do with the black and white of the contract.
They still won't tell you.
But because they've never even read it.
It's the stupidest thing ever. Like, why wouldn't you say, I got 3 offers
Exactly.
at 1, 1,
Give
1,
a
2,
range.
and
Give a
150?
range.
No, I told them exact. Do you?
Yeah, if they ask, but I also tell the seller on the front end, it's like, hey, we're gonna probably get multiple offers on the property. Are you okay with me disclosing what the highest offer is if an agent calls me? Because these are your options. And then if you do it in an email and they email you back and they say, no, I don't want you to do that. Well, now you have something written saying that you don't have to.
But I feel like some listing agents, when you confront them and you tell them that this is not the way, they don't like it.
Too bad.
Yeah, but that's.
How many-
You don't want them to be mad at you.
You don't want to put your offer in jeopardy. You don't
Yeah,
wanna-
I know. I'm just teasing you.
How many agents have you asked a question to and they're like, no, we're not doing that? I'm like, have you asked your client? Because I just told you like 2 seconds ago. Like, you should probably go talk to your client. So many agents think that their job is way more important than it is.
I was just gonna say.
We
so
are
they
we
go.
are here to manage the relationship,
So,
not make decisions for the seller or buyer. I've gotten into knockdown dragouts where I'm like, listen, I need you to hang up the phone and go talk to your client and then call me back. And I've been on situations where I'm like, you know what, everything you're saying is amazing, I have to ask my client. I said, I can't make decisions for him. I hang up, I literally text my client texts me, I call him back. He's like, you did not talk to your client that quickly. I said, I have recorded communication to where I did, and no, they're not interested in what you're doing. This literally just happened with another agent. He's like, oh, we're not gonna blah, blah, blah. I said, no. You're getting into a legal situation. You need to go back and communicate the consequences to your client before you even tell me anything. It's like agents do that, but that's because we don't read the contract and we try to get our ego involved and we think we are so much more valuable. But I think the place where we're going to run into problems is by not reading the contract and understanding what it means, so we can explain it to our clients.
Maybe we should have a contract now.
Oh my gosh.
I mean.
How many times, I mean, I've only been here for a month, but here's the thing with here's where we get people that don't show up. You know, and even though we do have a lot of people on Zoom, but what most agents don't like is contract classes,
Yeah.
script
Yeah.
classes, and role play classes.
And
But
those
what
are
we
all the
trying-
things you need.
Yeah, and that's like, those are the three things the only three things that you need to be a rock star agent. But nobody wants to come and learn. You know, we teach you lead generation and all these things. So I would encourage you also, you know, write down those top three things that you know that you're not good at. Okay, maybe it's writing a listing contract, maybe it's doing the listing presentation, maybe it's how to, you know, do a CMA. The main reason why you're not doing as much business as you could be is because you're one skill away from being able to do more transactions. And that's really it. So is normally, you know what, I'm great at showing property, right? I love showing property, but you know what? I'm afraid of that buyer's agent contract.
Do you want to know how to make the most money as a real estate agent?
Yes.
You write down your value. Everything that makes you valuable, everything that you do that makes you valuable, and then you communicate it to the world. I mean, seems overly simplistic, but that's what, if everybody in your database, your 300 plus people know what your value is and you're able to effectively communicate it at a high level, why would anybody use anybody else? Because you're connected with them at some level. The problem is that we are a commodity. At a base level, we don't do anything else that anybody else doesn't do. Everybody in the real estate agent industry pretty much does the same thing. We're all a gallon of milk, a gallon of gas. Like, that's just us. So that's why our commissions have been negotiable. But if you write down your value on everything that you do, what makes you different, what makes you special, what makes you unique, what makes you different than Parnian, than Samantha, than Sandra, what makes you different, what makes you better, what makes you the best real estate agent in your market, and then you communicate that at a high level. Let's say that your value proposition is mediocre, and if you communicate that to the world, you're already doing 90% more than everybody else that's out there, because most people are not communicating anything to the world. They're like, I'm going to call a lead and hopefully they use me. I'm going to call a lead and hopefully they use me. Like online leads, everybody wants online leads because it's speed to lead, and they're hoping like, oh, you can't communicate your value to an online lead in enough speed to actually get them to use you. That's why it's like a 1% conversion rate, if that. I stopped doing online leads. Tracy and I stopped because the effort and the energy to actually convert an online lead, we've done it. Some of our biggest sales have been because of online leads, but we took our energy and our effort and put it somewhere else because there's more value there, and not doing that anymore. But most people are not able to communicate their value. If you can communicate your value, you're already doing more than everybody else.
Yeah, and I think that is sometimes a challenge because we don't want to like say, oh, how great we are, or what have you, right? You know, or we have a self-confidence problem, right? So I think the best way to determine your value is take the top 5 people. People that love you, care about you, trust you, okay? Maybe an agent that you just did a deal with or in the past that you did a great job with. A client, whether it was a seller or a buyer, a past client. And I mean, you should always be getting testimonials, and most of you don't, but that's a great way. And ask them, what do you think my greatest attributes are? You know, what did you like best about working with me? Okay, and then you can get that reaction from your seller and your buyer, and that will help you kind of elaborate on your, your values, because sometimes it's hard
We're
to,
too far apart.
what's that?
What? I'm messing with her because we're not both in the frame, and I just realized that,
Oh,
because I'm standing too far apart.
That's why I've been holding it.
I'm like, what is she?
My arm's like,
Oh, I'm sorry.
no, you guys
We
are
just,
good. This is
you know,
fantastic.
need to hug. So anyway, that's kind of my idea, like, pick top 5 and just ask them, the question. It's kind of a weird question, but, don't ask your spouse, though, or your partner.
I think you keep
No,
saying.
no, that's my best about me. They'll be like,
You
is
don't wanna know.
this a trick question?
It's a trap for sure. For sure, it's a trap.
So.
I did a podcast with Tracy yesterday, and I did these rapid fire questions at the end. And I'm like, what's your favorite color? What's your favorite song? What's your favorite
Yeah.
food? Who's your favorite person? And she's like, oh, that's a trap. I'm like, not if you answer it the right way. It's not.
No, absolutely.
All right, that the class?
That, you're asking me, yeah,
All
I
right.
think that's it. I mean, obviously, if they
Well, guys,
have questions or concerns.
Reach out to us if you need, reach out to Tammy, reach out to me if you guys have any additional questions, or if we didn't hit on a topic that you guys wanted. We're usually always here, but I hope this was helpful.
I think it was good. It answered questions for me,
Awesome.
which is, the most
Thank you,
important.
thank you, thank you.